Hello, everybody. This is Guy Cunningham, Vice President of Channel and Alliances for NetSurian, and welcome to the NetSurian podcast. I am very excited to have Greg Manson, who's the VP of Security Audit Alliance for Logically. Welcome, Greg.
Hey, good to be here.
Now, you're out on the East Coast in South North Carolina, right?
Yep, Raleigh, Durham area, RTP, Research Triangle Park, more specifically. So yes,
That's
it's
beautiful.
a great area, very popular, ranking very high for places to live. In fact,
A lot of young talent move in that direction too.
yeah, it's an ever-present flow of new college grads coming from great universities into areas where we're dealing with technology and life sciences. So
Yeah.
really cool.
My first company out of college that was recruiting me was there in RTP, and if I had taken that job, I would be in the agricultural chemical business today.
Oh
So,
yeah,
yeah, glad I didn't.
yeah. There's a lot of that. So still a good area, almost equidistant between the coast and the mountains. So you got it all, and a lot of activity here with the social scene. So it's nice, nice parks.
So, Greg, you've been in IT for almost 20 years now, or at least as IT
25.
director, 25.
Yeah.
And you're kind of, you ended up there. You went to IU, and then you got an MBA from UNC Wilmington. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up with Logically.
Yeah. Graduated with a computer information systems degree out of the Kelly School of Business at IU. Have to say that best value for education investment you could imagine. I've been doing it since I graduated. Essentially jumped right into being an IT director for mental health, substance abuse, and developmental disabilities company in Indiana. Did that for a year and got to move to Wilmington, North Carolina, and worked in healthcare as an IT director for 11 more years, and decided to jump over to life sciences as an IT director, working for a medical device and then a pharmaceutical. The interesting thing is that IT director experience did a couple of things for me, in that it gave me the exposure to operations and understanding what IT directors go through, but it also exposed me to an array of regulatory environments, specifically HIPAA, but then in life sciences, we had to deal with the FDA. So unique experience in dealing with the regulatory entities specific to how you run an IT department. That gave me some exposure to, running things a little differently, and definitely exposure to things like internal audit. And with that experience, I was working with Caroline's IT actually to handle our managed services. Caroline's IT has merged with Logically, so I'll continue to say Logically from now on.
Yeah, and that was last year, correct, or the year before?
Yes, it was last fall of 2019. So when I was using them as an IT director for my MSP services, and working with them to pretty much do business with my company. So we had the requirements to do FDA Part 11. So we had to have validated systems, and I had to make sure that they stayed validated. We had change control and risk assessment. So we pretty much built all of those policies with the Logically team, and got to a point where some things had happened at the pharmaceutical where I was at. Some drugs ended up not getting through their trials, and I had the opportunity to go over and work with Caroline's IT Logically to actually set up their control system, their quality management system, and do internal audit primarily for them. But what we discovered was that was great because it helped us get more business with life sciences specifically, but also healthcare, because of the HIPAA background that I had. We realized that our clients had the need for somebody to do that for them too. Right. And the idea was born that this would become a billable service. And we grew that from myself and Tyler Booker, who was just an intern at the time, to now a department of 6 people that actually do billable service. So we still have that internal component in managing the quality systems, getting SOC 2 attestations, working on privacy regulations that Logically is subject to. But we also do that for our clients. And the big one right now is CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, primarily for our customers that are in the DoD supply chain. Now, the regulatory environments are ever changing. The risk is ever changing. Obviously, when you're doing a compliance assessment, you're looking at risk. Think of HIPAA security rule. And we really built out on that in the subsequent couple of years to have a really robust security solution for our clients, but also an incident response team that we call the Tiger team, to help clients navigate this daunting world of cyber risk. And
yeah, you say it's daunting and it's ever changing. I remember when I was at Symantec, this was 20 years ago, and we were calling on companies like Carolina's IT and Logically and all the kind of the resellers that were merging into or trying to transform themselves into MSPs at the time. Yeah. And one of the biggest statistics that I used to scare people was, do you realize that there's over 200,000 new viruses produced every year? And that was a mind blowing statistic at the time. And just 6 months ago, I looked at the AV Test website and some of their statistics, and today there's more than 350,000 new pieces of malware every day.
Yes.
So it's a no-win situation if a company's trying to do it themselves. So what you're doing for your companies or for your customers is hugely important, and it's not an easy task.
Well, that's true. And when I was IT director back in the day, you had an MSP and you had an MSSP, the managed service security provider. And really, because the MSPs were initially focused on operations and efficiencies and ease of use for your users, and the MSP was a bolt-on because the MSPs hadn't done it. And I actually have a lecture now where we talk about how good MSPs like Logically have really kind of consumed the MSSP functions which they had to do to offer their services properly. Mm-hmm. And now with our secure care security suite, we really have almost totally encompassed the functionality of MSSP, because we have a SOC. Believe it or not, it's NetSurian. Hey. And we have a response team, and we have a consulting team that's all in the security audit and compliance department that help clients do risk assessments, help them create IT charters and IT security policies. And then they have the technology that they can use to really be more secure and reduce risk. And the MSP functions, as you think of it, are really contained in what we offer now. And any MSP that's worth anything, and unfortunately for them, a lot of the competition hasn't embraced security as well as Logically has. Customers need to look somewhere else at, and specifically start looking at Logically.
NetSurian has, I'll say, in excess of 500 MSP and MSSP partners. And I talk to, companies large and small, and I am perpetually surprised and frustrated at the same time at the number of MSPs that are satisfied with off-the-shelf firewall and I'll call it a legacy AV system. I won't say any brand names, but a signature-based AV solution.
You already did, Guy.
Well, yeah. I don't, back then, 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, we were seeing a decline in our Symantec endpoint protection in the small business, in the commercial space, 10 to 15% a year. And it was, at that time, it was principally the MSPs that were buying antivirus through their RMM platform for 75 cents, 50 cents an endpoint. And it was companies that I'd never heard of at the time, but they were checking a box and saying to their customer that they had antivirus. Um, and I think it's still going on today. Unfortunately, the names are more well known today, but the level of protection compared to what's available today is the same. So it's surprising. So I applaud you for what you're doing. You're not just throwing tools at the solution. You're also building process and discipline, and a multi-layered strategy for your customers. And so they could, if they take your advice, they can be confident that they're doing the best that they can. So tell me,
Duty of
Greg,
care is what we like to call it, Guy.
curative
Your
care,
responsibility, duty of care.
duty of care.
Every organization has that responsibility now to protect their cyber assets. And the duty of care is to follow that responsibility and take the essential actions that you need to do. And they're advanced. That's what our secure care suite does. And one thing that's interesting that we haven't talked about is one of the great components of that package is end user training.
Hmm.
So we are talking today a lot about some of the technical solutions that we have, like the EDR and the SIM and the SOC, but the users can still find ways to circumvent the controls that are put in place by the technology tools. So you have to develop what we call a culture of security. So it's so important that we've included that as a core package, with the secure care offering that we're now selling clients.
So I got a question for you, Greg. We've seen an increasing number of our partners take the position, take the stance that either the customer takes their full security suite offering, or they sign a liability release form absolving the MSP of responsibility for security breaches, or they say goodbye to that customer, just
Yeah.
because the risk, not just to that individual customer, but the risk to the MSP and to the rest of the MSP's customers is amplified.
Yeah.
Where's logically on that spectrum?
So we're a little less draconian, I guess, with regard, and that's good business sense. So if you're doing, a new customer and they already have a security suite or they already have an EDR, that's different from what we're offering. You want to be able to work a solution to get them where we are with our standard packages, which I believe is one of the best security suites available. But you can't just say, if you're not going to use our product or our suite, then we're not going to cover you. There are some things that we use to motivate clients to move away from that. And frankly, Guy, that's a really big issue, because we've had scenarios like catastrophic incidents at counties where we've come in and uprooted the existing EDR because it wasn't configured correctly. Our team didn't have the experience with it and put in our EDR solution as containment, as part of the incident
Mm.
response. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in licensing. That you look at how long, if you have a county that's got 150,000 or 200,000 citizens, it's relatively large. The downtime for a week, while we're still doing containment and messing around with a virus that's still running around in the environment, to uproot your EDR becomes a business case if you can save a week or
Mm.
even save a handful of days, right? So we don't, when we're looking at new clients and selling to them, we have a questionnaire, we have really in-depth background with the client to understand what they have, and we find solutions to move them forward into our product. But one of the big selling pieces that we actually have is our ransom protect service. So essentially, if they're using our suite, and that's the carrot, they get $25,000 worth of ransomware protection, which is essentially an entitlement to the aforementioned Tiger team. So you use our suite, we've got confidence that that suite's going to protect you. If, and it's always a possibility, guy, we work in security, the threat actors are good.
Yep.
Or their user does something dumb, something happens, and there is a ransomware incident in your environment, you have an entitlement to $25,000 worth of work from the security audit and compliance Tiger team to help you recover from that. And that's a big incentive. So customers see that as an insurance policy or a guarantee, however they want to say it. I'd never use those words. It's not in the contract. It's protection for them. But that's a big carrot to get them to move towards our secure care process.
That's really interesting. I've heard of a couple of incident response companies that have retainers in that range of $25,000 just to kind of have them at your beck and call if you need them, cost $25K. So for you guys to have that as an entitlement to your team from the beginning, that's pretty impressive.
It's very cost effective for the client. Essentially $20 a month as part of the package, which you talk about a retainer, that's 25,000 cash flow going out. I will say that we also offer a service block solution that engages our team to work on the DRBCP with the client and the incident response, the IR. So if you buy a service block of, let's say, $20,000, the Tiger team will engage. You'll be appointed a lead, which is important if there ever is an incident. And we work through all of the various policies, procedures, work instructions for an incident and go through tabletop tests. We'll do essentially some internal audit functions. We'll make sure that the backup restores are working and all that decrements that service block, but it still leaves the entitlement should an incident happen. The clients can still carry the $25K ransomware protect, but it wouldn't decrement that block. But some clients will go further into that to have us, because incident response, well, you have cyber insurance and they typically have incident response teams. Every time the incident response team from the insurance companies come in and see an incident and see that the MSP is supporting them or is an MSP that has a good reputation, like Logically, they'll actually allow us to continue to run the incident response because we're on the ground. We're on the ground. The insurance company at best is 1,000 or 10,000 feet up, having only queried the client about their security via questionnaire or reviewing their SOC 2. So it's a big deal to have those resources available because time is absolutely money in case of a crypto or any cyber incident.
Well, you mentioned the insurance companies and bringing in people after the fact. That I think that if your customer has worked with you up front to build those policies and procedures and work streams and the incident response plan, and you've gamified a little bit with the tabletop exercise, you're light years ahead of most small business organizations in the amount of effort that they've put into preparing for an attack. So that should absolutely give them confidence that you're ready to respond in real time on the ground on the customer and the insurance company's behalf.
Yeah. And frankly, if we could run a tabletop test in the sales cycle to have one of our, give us your incident response policies and we're going to throw some real world scenarios that this team was working on last week at you and that policy. And it's universal. The gaps you see on that first review and the first tabletop test are really instructive to the client. And it does get better over time, but to show them, just because you have that piece of paper, and you may have put a lot of time into it, until you test it, until you work through it, especially with somebody that knows how an incident breaks down, you're really not protected by that policy. You're going to waste time, and time's money. I mean, I hate to say it's cliche, right, Guy? But, in a breakout, it's everything. Right. When you have, minutes, seconds to try to contain an outbreak, to think that you're going to fumble around for 2 hours with your incident response procedures is catastrophic.
In our in some of our conversations with customers as we're showing them our platform, um, we show that MITRE ATT&CK is it's getting a lot of press right now, and people
We were
are
talking about it yesterday.
people and vendors alike are saying yes, we are familiar with or we use MITRE, and I you know I continue to learn about MITRE, and I'm in it up to my neck all the time, and so I'm sure that an end user customer or even an MSP may be familiar with MITRE but not really understand it, and then the next step is actually applying it into the business process and how do you take advantage of MITRE. And we show um, an attacker, the timeline of an attacker doing what they need to do all the way up to the discovery phase of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. It's right before compromise. So they're doing all the things that they need to do to get ready to start exfiltrating and start encrypting, et cetera. And it only takes, in our demo, it took 15 minutes, actually 13
Yeah.
minutes, right? And so think about it. If they're doing their due diligence and preparing for the actual act, and it only takes 15 minutes, think about how fast they can suck everything out or encrypt your systems, right? It's going to be even faster than that. So testing that incident response plan is huge because, right, you love it.
Yeah, and Guy, just for the listeners that may not know about MITRE ATT&CK, because I referenced that, we were talking about that yesterday in a simplified slide to articulate what the various tools in the stack do. MITRE ATT&CK framework is essentially the threat actor's playbook. So if you understand MITRE ATT&CK, you have a great understanding of how a threat actor is going to operate when they get into your environment, how they're going to get there, how they establish persistence, and then how they launch the attack that Guy just articulated. So, our listeners, viewers, I really encourage you to just go out and start studying it. It's really what most modern security folks are using to understand risk and how it's coming at us. And it's worth you understanding it because you do get some tremendous insight from the tool.
Yeah, and the CK in ATT&CK stands for common knowledge. So it's a common encyclopedia of the attackers' tactics and techniques. That's the AT&T. So it's very informative. So Greg, let's step back a little bit, and we've talked a lot about where you've been and what you're doing at Logically and how you're helping your customers. When you go home or you visit your in-laws or your cousins, and they introduce you to somebody and they have to describe what you do, what do you think that they say? How do they describe what Greg Manson does?
I've made it simple for my mom and in-laws, and essentially they just think I'm the CEO of the company. You're dealing with 85 and 78-year-olds who, even when I was in college, had trouble understanding what I was doing with regard to IT operations. You can imagine in 1990, the concept of wanting to be management at a director level running computers was foreign.
Right.
And, that over time, people started to get it. But in security, especially, and that's what's really scary because people that are in it like you and I, it's just, we eat and breathe it, right? But a lot of people still don't realize that they're security. They don't, that's why the user training for end users, the secure culture of security is so important. And it's a little unfortunate that they don't understand. I simplify it. I'm not the CEO, but I am an important person to help our clients and the organization I work for help Logically reduce risk. And risk is very real because you have virtual criminals that are trying to attack the environment. And it's still kind of an ethereal concept, but it tends to gravitate that way. And fortunately or unfortunately, the silver lining guide to things like SolarWinds Sunburst is that it made mainstream real media. I mean, it was on NBC News at 6:30, right? So people are getting awareness that there is a cyber risk environment, but frankly, half the population, and especially a lot of the CFOs, are still not seeing the benefit of investing in security. And that's one of what my big part of my mission. And my best friend here, Jennifer, is listening. She knows I'm passionate about presenting because I'm trying to evangelize the importance of investing in cybersecurity. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, that's what I am. I'm the person that's just trying to promote.
Officer. You can still be the CEO. So, what I've found, Greg, is that I don't think that it's that most people aren't aware of the need to be, to have cybersecurity. I think it's a combination of, ignorance, their career, their hobbies, et cetera, are other things, so they're not as educated about it. But they also become immune to the sense of risk. If you live in a situation with stress around a certain area for a certain period of time, you get accustomed, you get acclimated to that, and then it starts to feel comfortable, and then you start getting complacent. And I think that's where most people are, is that they know that the cyber actors are out there, but they don't know what to do about it necessarily. And they've become accustomed to that sense of a perpetual risk. And then they start being complacent and start doing things that they shouldn't do. So it's a consistent, perpetual job on our part to keep ratcheting up that perception.
And that's
risk,
a good point, because you may be able to get in with a hot topic issue with the board or the executive team, the CFO, working with IT, because IT absolutely sees it. That's never a hard sale. It's the sale to the guys that own the budgets. And you may get in there, but what I want to say special about the secure care package and NetSurian being a key component to that is the reporting. So they may not experience an incident. Let's hope they don't. That's what they're investing in, but they don't see it, right? They don't see that the system is working as intended, or they know that it is, but they don't know that the security package is doing anything. So being able to report and show the number of events that are coming into the SIM, to show the incidents that the SOC has worked through to keep the operation running, and frame it in a way that if those incidents had not been addressed, there would have been a loss to operations. Very clearly drives that point to absolutely the CFO, because he recognizes the potential impact financially, but also the ELT, because they don't want to breach the trust with their customers, their employees, their other stakeholders. So reporting is very important. I really like the tools we have for reporting out of NetSurian as part of our security suite, a key part of it. And that helps continue that. And hopefully our clients never experience an incident, but being able to communicate it is important.
And that's a perpetual request from ours, is to always improve the reporting. And that's something that in just this past week, we released a new version. So all of our partners are going to go through an upgrade cycle, and a new threat protection performance report is part of that. And it shows on a per customer basis. Just it's simplistic, but it's also valuable in that it shows how many events have happened, or how total log volume, how many events, how many did our SOC review, and then how many did we respond to in partnership with our partners on a per customer basis. So that's individualized to your end user customer. And our partners have been asking for that for quite a while, and we're excited to release that and give granular level reporting tools to our partners to make their job easier, to show the customers exactly what you talked about. How nothing's happened. How do I know that you're doing your job, right?
Well, it just triggered a memory of my old days working for a CFO who essentially said, Greg, IT is like electricity. You're the IT director. As long as when people plug in, they can connect and there's no complaints about IT, then you'll keep your job and get your bonuses and all that. And that way of thinking, which was absolutely a decade ago, uh, needs to
Mhm.
change, because you do want to keep the things going. Absolutely, that concept is okay, but it's also kind of outdated in the sense that you got to be constantly looking at what's happening to know what you're making the investment in. The objective is that the users are productive and able to use their tools effectively, but there's so much changing behind the scenes, and it specifically with security, but also in technology in general, which, by the way, logically, as an MSP professional services company, can help the IT directors with as well. But getting that reporting, that's it right there. I mean, I've been bad in the past, a decade ago, but you, Naturian, our other partners, really drilling in on the reporting. And it doesn't have to be complex. You just have to find the key measures that resonate. And that's what it is right now. What we're seeing the number of events, the number of the incidents, the amount of time that the SOC and the MSP have put together to protect the client are really valuable pieces of information.
You mentioned utility computing, and when I got into kind of infrastructure software, this is 15, 16 years ago with
Yeah, yeah,
Veritas. And I went through my new employee onboarding, and they had this cultural presentation, what they called it, the 9 box presentation. I don't even remember what were in the 9 boxes at the time, but the big part of it that resonated with me was that they were forecasting that in the future, IT would become a utility. You would pay for what you use. And back then, 15 years ago, all of us new employees were like, how is that
yeah.
going to happen? And we've seen it today, right? You pay for Amazon servers, not
Mm-hmm.
just at the server at a per minute charge, but you're paying for microservices, based upon how often you use it. So yeah, that vision has become, I think, very fully realized. It's going to continue to improve, but that just goes to the ease of consumption. That doesn't speak to how
Yeah,
secure those environments are.
yeah. I mean, yeah.
So
Anyway,
look ahead for me, right? So we've been talking about what Logically is doing and how important it is. What are the projects that you are, speaking about futures? What are the things that you're looking ahead for, that you're kind of working on, that aren't coming to fruition today, but that maybe over the next 2, 3, 5 years that you're hoping you'll be able to realize, as we continue to progress in the cybersecurity space?
yeah, and this comes from, there's a couple of things. So the Internet of Things and internet connected devices like CNC machines that had never really been intended to have network
Hmm.
access or be at a level of access that threat actors could get to. And that includes things, the terrifying things like the IV machine or the insulin pump,
Mm.
or the pacemaker.
Oh
Those
yeah.
are the things that terrify people because it's personal. We got other things. We deal in CMMC, the DFARS, DoD world, helping clients get to their certification, leveraging NIST 800-171. And our biggest weakness is the stuff that's on the floor. And
Hmm.
it's a
Interesting.
struggle to try to get those machines, and frankly the manufacturers, and I mentioned one, but that's not necessarily the only one, to get those manufacturers to think about security and be able to get that integrated in the conventional security platforms that we have is a huge challenge. And
I bet they've
yeah,
never
they
had to think
never had to
about it.
think about it. And as a consequence, we're doing all sorts of Byzantine things to try to protect that environment. VLANs, full network segregation, disconnecting devices from the network, because we can't
Hmm.
protect them. We're not getting firmware updates. They're just not designed for security in the way, i.e., you have one account that can have full administrator access to the devices. And just the code is designed to machine out a fan blade for a jet engine that goes into, a military jet. It's not designed to be secure, and that's kind of scary. So I want to get,
It is. I
I
never
want to
thought about
get
that.
into, getting that. That's what we're going to be working on. I hate to say one specific regulation, DFAR's driving this, but you'd be surprised how many organizations are at some point in the supply chain of DoD, and there's risk all over the place. That's a bigger thing. Supply chain risk. I've talked to Carl Noon, our CFO, about supply chain risks and his work with various CPA organizations that he's talked to, and that's another in general. So you've got military contractors, but the supply chain risk and managing them through compliance and audit and security up and down the chain is a big deal. I'm going to be working a lot on supply chain risks for us and for our customers. And then, you and I are really keen on artificial intelligence and where that can take us. It's really cool because, you have artificial intelligence in your tools. You're using artificial intelligence to build your tools and to respond. We're using it, and that's cool. In the compliance world, I don't want to spend too much time about compliance, but just being able to go through all the rules and regulations and the specific client environment and put those together and being able to manage compliance initiatives, artificial intelligence has a ton of potential for that too. So Internet of Things, supply chain risk, artificial intelligence, those are things that are going to be rolling off my tongue for the next couple of years.
You mentioned something in that the DFARS and the CMMC and NIST 801 and 71. And I remember, I'm probably showing my age, but I think I may have been in college or shortly out of college when SOX and GLBA kind of came
404, baby.
And yeah, and there was this whole perception of compliance. It's the government putting their thumb on business, and then you got HIPAA and PCI, and so many organizations view compliance as a as a burden, as a restriction. But the way that I've come to see it is that in today's economy, everybody's connected to the internet, and everybody's interconnected with their customers and their partners and their suppliers, even their competitors to a degree. And in order for the economy to function smoothly, we all have to do our part to protect that interconnectedness. And that's, in my mind, that's what those compliance regulations, at least from a cybersecurity perspective, are trying to do. Is they're trying to keep the engine lubricated and functioning smoothly.
I love that example, and you really got me going now, because a couple of things I dealt with that right away. So that when I left healthcare, I went into a medical device company. As employee number 17, they essentially hired me to build up the system so they could address 404. So SOX, Sarbanes Oxley. That was a big, huge deal. I leveraged the COBIT framework from my SACA to help me get there. But the interesting thing about SOX and the HIPAA security rules. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of government regulation, but those two things absolutely, if we liked it or not, established this paradigm of having to operate securely. So much so, Guy, and this is a did you know, that the top 20 IT general controls that we generally work with for our publicly traded companies, so the SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, IT general controls, our security questionnaire that every one of our salespeople uses to interview the clients is based on the top 20 IT general controls out of Sarbanes-Oxley. And those questions haven't really changed. So they nailed it early on. And the Big Four and the regulators really recognized where they needed to have controls, and it hasn't changed a whole lot. HIPAA security has, but that security in that whole sense is expanded. But since Omnibus, the HIPAA security rule is really, really good. I mean, it addresses a lot of those things. So these regulators, and you have to hand it to NIST. We all know NIST was kind of behind that to begin with, but those frameworks are awesome. And it was something. So as IT director, I'm looking at having to spend. I had all the same things my customers had in my head when we were confronted with these, but I've seen the light. And that's why the compliance piece for the security audit and compliance team at Logically is so critical, to have that awareness and to be tying it with the security execution pieces that we're doing makes us a real asset to our customers.
So you mentioned the questionnaire that your sales team uses was pulled from SOX, basically.
Yeah.
And we use, or we refer to, the NIST cybersecurity framework a lot. And it's interesting, whenever you say NIST cybersecurity framework, oh yeah, 800-171, 853. And I'm like, no, it's not the compliance. It's the cybersecurity framework. It's a best practices framework for what you need to do. Those 5 pillars of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. How is Logically using that, either directly or indirectly? Obviously you're addressing each one of those pillars in what you do, but do you reference that cybersecurity framework at all in your messaging or your training?
Well, point specific, we actually have clients where the security audit and compliance team will do a CSF initiative for our clients. So working through all of the controls that are part of CSF and assessing the maturity and helping clients develop protocols and procedures to address the controls is absolutely a project that we work with on our customers. But of course, the general tenets of CSF are intertwined. All of these are intertwined and can crosswalk to each other to some extent, but absolutely the CSF, is seasoning the solutions that we're offering to our clients. If you look at the suite, so I think that's the best way to say it.
Obviously as cybersecurity, it's, we as NetSurian, we kind of set that 5th pillar, that recover pillar, off to the side because we're not a BCDR kind of continuity company. But we feel a responsibility to address those first 4. And so in our vernacular, what we've kind of rephrased them as, instead of identify, protect, detect, and respond, we say predict, prevent, detect, and respond. And really what we're trying to do with our solutions is to enable our partners and our customers to be able to predict when something's going to happen, prevent that from happening. And then in case it gets past those 2 filters, detect when it does, when something does get into your systems, and then be able to respond as quickly as possible. And those are our governing kind of foundational matrices that we operate from as we build out our solution, as we engage with our partners in order to provide them more tooling and more capabilities.
And that's awesome because you're a keystone to the security suite at Logically and the Secure Care suite. So we're hitting all of our marks here with the product we're offering, aren't we?
Yeah. So we covered a lot of ground here, Greg. We talked about how you got started 25 years ago. And I don't know if I told you this, but I went to IU also, but I went to the Indianapolis campus.
Oh, yeah.
For my undergrad.
IUPUI.
My brother, IUPUI. My brother went down to Bloomington. And then we talked about, how you got into compliance and made your way to the MSP side of the industry and all of your experience with the various compliance frameworks, HIPAA and DFARS and NIST and CMMC, et cetera. And we talked about the Secure Care and Logically and how important your organization is, not only to Logically, but to your customers, and making sure that they're protected and prepared. And then we also talked a little bit about, the things that you see coming down the road, the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, et cetera. So what else should we have talked about that I wasn't smart enough to think about asking you?
Well, you did a good job of asking questions, frankly. So, especially, ultimately, let's be honest, the intent is so our customers and our stakeholders will understand what we're doing at Logically to offer security and be secure because we eat our own dog food. I think we've articulated how well and how important NetSurian is as a keystone to our products and our solutions. We also use NetSurian as part of our SOC 2 attestation. We're ingesting IDS IPS logs across the country into our NetSurian instance. So we're using it too. We really covered a lot of the things that you want, but the thing that we didn't spend a lot of time on was the users. We talked a lot about the training. I mentioned it and how excited I am. Secure Care has that user training, but some really fundamental things to control the users. In my world at ISACA, we're like fascinated with zero trust. I don't want to get into zero trust because frankly, we haven't figured it out. Now, there's some of my ISACA cohort will, especially the ones that do presentations on it, by the way, will disagree with me.
Yeah.
But it's a novel idea. It's conceptually something that can permeate other controls. We're not there yet. So we have to confront where the real issue is still. And that's really that culture of security to get everybody bought in to know that each individual is a risk and to operate. So if we did talk about, we didn't emphasize it, but the users with their privileges, well, you can manage it, you can endeavor to go to zero trust. There's inevitably going to be something that they could do that will introduce risk and disaster into the environment, and you have to.
That's really important. I'm glad you brought that up. I think we've all seen the statistic that 70% of breaches happen at the endpoint.
Yeah.
And that's after all the investments in the, defense in depth.
Yeah.
You've got multiple layers and multiple technologies. And internally we're trying to figure out how to encourage our partners to take that defense in depth philosophy and expand it across the organization, because we'll see that customers, they're always budget conscious, and so they'll approve defense in depth, multi-layered strategy for their critical assets, their servers and their core infrastructure. But when it comes to the end user, they're like, they start pinching pennies, even though the end user is their greatest risk, either intentionally or unintentionally. And so, we're starting to see an increasing number of our partners add more tooling, more protective layers, more technologies at the endpoint in order to prevent that from happening. And training and user awareness is definitely a piece of that, but they're still going to do things that they shouldn't without intent, I think, just because the attackers are so smart, and they use social engineering to such a high degree that it's still going to be one of the most common entry points into the network.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, I appreciate that. Logically is one of our, shining star partners. We are really excited about what the next couple of years holds for this partnership. If people want to talk with you, either, other MSPs who want to pick your brain a little bit, or end users who like what they've heard about your approach and your philosophy, how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to reach Greg Manson?
So contact at logically.com. So LOGICALLY.com as an email. But I encourage you to go to logically.com, the website. I mentioned Jennifer. She's listening here with us, our Vice President of Marketing. She's done a fantastic job in building out that site to offer information in ways that are consumable for customers at any level. If it's IT, if it's a CFO, if it's a CEO, or even just a regular end user, the information there is very helpful. There's contact information there as well. And the site is really good, and I think that's the best way to try to reach out. And a contact they'll get us. If they reference this discussion either in the subject line or in a brief message. That will help get it routed to me or one of my team.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, sir. So anybody that wants to get a hold of me, I'm at netshurian.com or partners at netshurian.com. We appreciate you sitting with us through this conversation. And Greg, I appreciate your time. This has been great. Look forward to having more of these with you.
Yeah, and we're going to have one, Guy. I'm going to do the same for you, interviewing you from a logically perspective and how Netshurian helps and works with us too. So we got one more of these. Just I get to be the.
That's right. Well, I'm looking forward to that. All righty. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
We will sign off.
Great.